Well, I said it a couple days ago on the 59th episode of the Rebel Scum podcast, and I am saying it again now. Star Wars isn't ruined. No, it's definitely not. But we're going to talk about it. I'm joined with Rob McDonald. Rob, what's up?
Oh, not too much, man. Glad to be back.
The Dark Lord of the Sith, Darth Ward, was away working for a few weeks at the end of summer, and that's why you haven't been on the channel much.
Yeah, in wonderful Thunder Bay, and if no one knows where that is, that's pretty much in northern Ontario, way up there. Pretty much, I was about 45 minutes from Minnesota, so even that to that area of Canada, that's where I was. So yeah, glad to be back from a short stay away.
Yeah. So while you were gone, or right when you got back, the news dropped that Colin Trevorrow was let go. He was canned as the director of Episode 9, The Next to Last Jedi. And then 2 days later, JJ Abrams was come on. Brock and I did a reaction. Andrew and Josh did a reaction. You did a little video on the YouTube channel of your initial thoughts. But what got lost in all of that was the news that, and Brock and I only talked about it briefly on our reaction, was Chris Terrio was hired on to co-write Episode 9 with JJ Abrams. Rob, before we get into this conversation, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about Chris Terrio from what you know of Chris Terrio and what he has done in the past?
Well, I mean, if you literally IMDb Chris Terrio, he doesn't have that big of a writing credits. Like his credits are limited to about 5 or 6 things, if I remember correctly. But the two main things that you could know him from is firstly with his work on Ben Affleck, one of his first writing features. He won an Academy Award for Argo, writing that movie. And number 2, he's kind of been one of the mainstay writers for the DCEU. He wrote Batman v Superman, and he wrote Justice League as well. So yeah, it's the first time I guess somebody like Disney has actually plucked somebody from the DCEU. So he's a great writer, and it'll be interesting to see how he does.
Yeah, what really throws me off on this whole thing is when he was first hired to write Batman v Superman, people were ecstatic. They're like, oh, Academy Award winner. He wrote Argo. He's going to be writing Batman versus Superman. This is awesome news. Yeah. Super excited for this to happen. Batman and Superman came out. Obviously, the fan base and critics were very, very divided. And now it's almost like the JJ Abrams, the storm of JJ Abrams is starting to pass. And just like a hurricane before it, right behind is the Chris Terrio end of it. And now people are really starting to hate on Chris Terrio because they're realizing that this is the guy that did Batman v Superman. We don't know what extent, but he co-wrote Batman v Superman.
One of the later stuff, I think, or rewrites,
And Batman he's a killer and a brander, and he does a lot of weird non-Batman-y things in that film. And so there's a concern right now that could Chris Terrio do this with Luke Skywalker? Could he change who Luke Skywalker is? What do you think about that?
I mean, I don't know. It's really hard to tell as to what part he really had to do with Batman v Superman. Because, I believe he came in for one of the late rewrites, and a lot of people that's still Zack Snyder's movie. Zack Snyder has his fingerprints all over that movie. So whatever it is, I feel like that type of stuff was there. I mean, would it be interesting if all of a sudden Poe Dameron started branding people and just knocking out people with crates and stuff like that, and throwing grenades at people, just be straight up murdering people in some type of way? That'd be interesting, I guess. But I mean, Chris Terrio, a lot of people, are just hating on him altogether because of his more recent works. I mean, obviously, we'll still have to see how Justice League is going to be. But I mean, myself, I like Batman v Superman, and the fact that he was brought in as a writer who was Academy Award winner, as a very young writer, relatively young writer. I think he did well. I mean, again, it's hard to tell exactly what was his and what was, David S. Goyer's, what was Zack Snyder's ideas. It's you kind of need to muffle through it, because as of right now, you don't know what Chris Terrio. For all we know, Chris Terrio could have did the whole warehouse fight scene. Maybe that wasn't even in the movie, and he wrote that in. And for all we know, like he could have been responsible for all the good stuff.
Yeah, that's a big possibility. Also, he is a writer, and he's a writer for hire. As much as people don't want to hear that, he's a writer for hire. And so he wrote Argo, and Ben Affleck said, "Hey, I worked with this guy in Argo. He's a really good writer. Zack Snyder, why don't you use him?" And Zack Snyder says, "Fine." Or Ben Affleck's like, "I won't do this unless you get him." But whatever, he comes in, and Zack Snyder's like, "This is what we're doing." And Zack Snyder gives him the story treatment that Zack Snyder wrote out. And Terrio's like, "Well, okay." And he's hired to write it. It's not his vision going into the script. It is the director's vision going into it. And now you have Disney and Lucasfilm, and JJ Abrams is hired to write it. And, there was probably a conversation when they were doing it. He was like, "I can't write it alone. Kasdan's not going to come back to write it with me. I need somebody of some kind of that I trust to write it." And I don't know. I mean, at some point, I don't know if they've worked side by side together or not in the past, but at some point, JJ Abrams has worked with Chris Terrio or knows enough about Chris Terrio to entrust him in writing Episode 9 with him, because JJ Abrams is going to be... Because the turnaround time now, they've pushed the film to December 20th, 2019, but on top of that, they've pushed the shooting date to June of 2018. So they won't start for another 9 months from now, which gives them, like 3-4 months of writing this script, getting the script solid. It's not Suicide Squad where they have 6 weeks to write it. They're going to get the script right. They're going to do it. They're going to get the script, and then they're going to have to do pre-production. And J.J. Abrams is going to find himself being torn in both directions because, sets will need to be built. And as much as everyone's like, "Oh, no CG," there's a boatload of CG in these films, more than ever before. And the artists of the CG, they're going to need to know what needs to be done too, because from June to December 2019, that's a year and a half, which 5 years ago was unheard of in making a film of this caliber in that amount of time. I remember when X-Men 3 came out and Matthew Vaughn passed on X-Men 3, or he quit because he didn't want to stay away from Spain that long or whatever it was. And they got Brett Ratner to come in. Brett Ratner had 7 months to make X-Men 3. And I remember watching it, and, the movie, people have opinions on it and whatnot, but he only had 7 months to get the script, the effects, like everything together in 7 months is nothing. Nowadays, that's actually a long time. A year and a half to do something Star Wars to wrap up this saga. Rob, are you concerned about the amount of time left?
The amount of time left, I don't think really bothers me, because again, it's like we are more than 2 years away from that release date right now. Like now that they moved it to December, and now that we've shuffled around these types of areas, I think what's interesting is that Chris Terrio has been announced for this, and it was only a month and a half ago that they announced that Trevor would not be writing it anymore, right, with his writing partner, and they announced that thing where that other writer, I think his name was Jack Thorne, was supposed to be taking over to write it. So I'm almost wondering, it's like, Jack Thorne was supposed to write it. That was only a month and a half ago. So what happened to Jack Thorne? Did he start writing it, or did he just come on and just start writing it and that was it? And, it's odd, because now it's like we're going into our third phase of writing for Episode 9, which is so odd, because we did not... Like, I didn't even remember hearing anything like that for The Force Awakens, and we definitely didn't hear anything like that for Last Jedi.
The Force Awakens definitely was, because there was the Michael Arndt script.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Script, and then they canned that, and then they brought in... who canned it? J.J. Abrams canned it, of course. So I think this whole thing, though, happened because Carrie Fisher's passing. She passed away. They need to figure out what to do with Leia. Lucasfilm had one idea. Trevorrow had another idea. That clashed. They got rid of it. Thorne was probably just writing the Trevorrow script anyway, because he was hired to rewrite Trevorrow's script. J.J. Abrams said, "Look, if you want me to do it, I will come back to Star Wars, but it's going to be my Star Wars, and I'm going to do this whatever I want," which is what I believe he said when he did The Force Awakens. Now, yes, he was probably forced to do certain things, and he will be again, and that's just the way it's going to work because it's Star Wars. That's why I think it's going through another phase of writing, is just because the Carrie Fisher thing was one thing. Then they're like, okay, well, maybe we'll figure it out. But that wasn't working, obviously, and Trevorrow was too much of whatever. And even if that script was getting to where Lucasfilm wanted to go, they hired J.J. Abrams. And you're not going to hire J.J. Abrams to make a movie he doesn't want to make. He's going to make the movie he wants to make, as safe or not as that film is going to be.
Right. Yeah. And even just going back to like Chris Terrio for a moment, I just dawned on this me a little bit now. The His involvement with Batman v Superman and Justice League, and again, we don't know how Justice League's going to be yet, so we'll see that. But both of those were collaboration projects where he had a writing partner that he was writing with, and again, you mentioned the whole JJ Abrams thing and his connection to Chris Terrio. I don't know where that connection is. I don't know where that thread connects in any way as of right now. I'd have to do more research to find out. But Chris Terrio won an Oscar for Argo as a sole writer. He wrote it himself, right? So I'm almost wondering is that he's co-writing with JJ Abrams, but I wonder if maybe JJ Abrams will be more of a story writer, and maybe they'll finally let Chris Terrio just write the script. Just write it himself and not have to, collaborate with David S. Goyer, with Joss Whedon, with, whoever he had to collaborate with Justice League, because and Batman v Superman, because again, like his writing credit that got everybody so hyped up, like you said, for when it's like, oh my God, he's coming into Batman v Superman, was a sole writing credit on Argo. So I'm almost wondering if they will just let him write. If they will just let him do what he did on his own so well in Argo, and do that with Star Wars. Yeah, I'm sure there'll be people checking on it and looking at it, giving him notes and whatnot. J.J. Abrams will be one of them. Kathleen Kennedy will be one of them. That will happen. But I'm just wondering if they'll let him just write and do what he does.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say 100% no.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to say, because I think J.J. Abrams will want his hands in there a lot. I don't have problems with Chris Terrio. As I mentioned on someone's Facebook yesterday, I said, you know what? Akiva Goldsman wrote Batman and Robin, and then he won an Oscar for Cinderella Man. Now, this is reverse, obviously, of that, I guess, is he won an Oscar, now he's come back. But that is, like, writers are hired to write the story the directors want them to write. You will have a Rian Johnson who writes his own. You will have some writers who have their own, they have enough clout to say, hey, no, this is the film that you're going to make, like a Sorkin or whatnot. But even then, I would imagine, when Fincher was probably like, make some changes to the Facebook movie, the social, like, make some changes to this, and Sorkin probably had to. But he has enough clout where it's not as bad as, Chris Terrio, who's done one movie, and yeah, he has an Oscar, but you're dealing with one person versus Warner Brothers versus Zack Snyder, who has a bit of a track record, good or bad, whatever. He has a track record, who was entrusted. And it was his film. He was making, even though it's not, quote unquote, a sequel to Man of Steel, it is a sequel to Man of Steel, which is his movie. So he could pull the strings there. Now, JJ Abrams, I think, is going to come in and say, look, here's how we're going to do it. Here's Rian Johnson. This is what I want to do. And it could even be JJ Abrams just sending him notes. But either way, they're both, I think, going to get that screenwriting credit on this one.
Well, yeah, I mentioned even on like the little video that you plugged earlier too, that my dream scenario with this in some way would be like The Last Jedi comes out, everybody loves it and whatnot, praising Rian Johnson, like, why isn't he doing episode 9 or whatever? And then they just all of a sudden say that Rian Johnson's doing a rewrite. It would be horrible, because then that would be the fourth realm of it. But if everybody loves Last Jedi, I think that's a case of when there would be a fourth rewrite and suddenly it's like Rian Johnson's doing a write on it. That's a case, I think, where people might get excited. And again, it was a dream scenario for me, like I mentioned in the video, that I'd love to see, like, Rian Johnson just get his hands a little bit on it and just, touch it up in some type of ways, touch it up in maybe ways that a JJ Abrams film doesn't normally get. Like the fact that we're hearing in The Last Jedi is that Rian Johnson's script really delves into these characters and, gets into their psyche a little bit more. So that something like that for a J.J. Abrams movie, which people would say maybe Force Awakens didn't have that as much as people would have liked, could do, or that Rian Johnson could do. But again, that's going down a what if scenario. As of right now, we're talking about Chris Terrio and J.J. Abrams, right? Of course.
Yeah, I don't think Rian Johnson's going to come back. I think he's done. I think he's going to say his piece, and he's going to go away, take a trip somewhere, probably to an Acto-type island, and just chill out on his own and not worry about Star Wars for another little while. And then maybe when they make the new trilogy, he'll come back, and maybe he'll godfather that new trilogy in some respect. But I think his time is done. I think, and I just think JJ Abrams is the kind of guy who he's been in the industry long enough. He has such a successful track record. I think he's the kind of guy who's like, look, I think the difference, and I referred to weeks ago, Colin Trevorrow was like a mini J.J. Abrams in a lot of ways, especially the way he did Jurassic World, how he returned you to the nostalgia of Jurassic World, which is what J.J. Abrams does so well. When you look at every single one of the films that he has directed, it's been nostalgia-driven. Mission Impossible 3, a little bit less so, but he still brought you back to the world that you loved about Mission Impossible and reminded you what it was about Mission Impossible that you liked, and then Ghost Protocol elevated that, and then the Rogue Nation elevated that, and hopefully that's the next one. He brings you in. He doesn't have to expand his characters. You don't have to have the most fleshed out characters, the most original story. His job for all of his films, Super 8 especially, Super 8 is all based on nostalgia, right? You're like watching an old 80s movie.
Yep.
His job is to remind you what you love about the movies or the movie that you're watching, the series that you're watching. His job is to remind you of that and then propel it forward. And I think now is the first time where that is off of his shoulder. He's done that. And I think the last time he had that opportunity, he kind of botched it with Star Trek Into Darkness, where he forgot. And I think this is where the lessons can be learned now. And with that, Star Trek Into Darkness can really, really pay off. That he learned that the nostalgia and reminding us of what we love about it has paid off. It's paid off. We all accept where he's gone now. Now tell me a story with the elements that you've brought to me and don't bring the nostalgia into it. Whereas Star Trek Into Darkness, he just kept that nostalgia train where he's like, Khan's in it. Yeah, because everyone loves Khan. And he forgot to understand the Khan. He forgot to understand it. And I think now he can learn from that. And because Rian Johnson just, as you said, he maybe propels these characters. He does weird things with it. He now has to answer that. So the nostalgia's been answered. New questions have arisen. And his job is to just tell this story now and not worry about reminding the audience why we love Star Wars. Because this is 3 movies in. If we're going to the theater to see it, obviously we love Star Wars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's going to be the trick because, again, even like you said, like Inner Darkness is such a interesting comparison because in a lot of ways, obviously it's a movie that stands on its own, but it's also incredibly influenced and incredibly taking from something like Wrath of Khan, right? We have Khan in it. We even have the ending that's kind of similar and close to what happens in Wrath of Khan. And, it's his chance to show that he really is a creative person and that he knows how to land something, because so many times he was known for the longest time about starting shows, right? Doing shows like Fringe and Lost. He started all those shows and came up with the opening ideas and then handed them off, right? He handed them off to Rian Johnson with Star Wars, but now he's got to come back and he's got to stick the landing. So that's going to be the real, like you said, it's going to be the challenge for him because he's nostalgia driven. Like you said, so many of his things are very nostalgia driven. So both Star Trek movies were nostalgia driven. There were plenty of things to in the first Star Trek movie to even wink towards the older Star Trek movies and the older series and whatnot. So it'll be interesting, and he's got to do it with Chris Terrio, and people might not be happy about it because of his recent work, but I'm hoping that, again, there's some type of big time camaraderie between them two, because as of right now, I don't understand where the connection between these two guys is. And I'm just hoping that we find out, hey, they, went to college together or something like that, to know something like that would be a lot more comforting. But it's interesting because, again, we're looking through possibly a third writer coming on to episode 9. So
I like to think of the writer of a film like the official or referee in a sporting event, where the less you hear about them, the better it is. The less you, like oh, the writing on this. It's like, shut up. Like, oh man, the official really ruined the game last night. Yeah. That's not cool. But when you don't hear about it and they're there, that means they're doing their job. When you don't hear the writer's voice in the film, they're doing their job. And that's what I like to think about, and that's where I think we are. And I don't worry about this being the third attempt because the Carrie Fisher, the General Leia one is one, and you can't really count that one. Then the second one was Trevorrow, and then that one was a circumstance of what happened previously, and then Trevorrow's, from what we're hearing, obviously, is Trevorrow's ego got in the way, and they were like, this isn't working. You are not making the decisions that you need to make. And you either let's just bring someone in that we know we can work with, and that the fans, although from what it seems right now, are very happy, but the fans will be on board with. Obviously, that didn't run. Rian Johnson, Deadline is reporting that Rian Johnson passed on episode 9. So it's good that they went to him. Even though we haven't seen The Last Jedi, I don't know. It could be the worst movie ever made. We have no idea. But, there hasn't been any, reports. We haven't heard anything about Rian Johnson and Kathleen Kennedy at all. I mean, we were at Star Wars Celebration, and Rian Johnson looked like he had the time of his life. So as much as it surprised me that he wasn't coming back, it makes sense because, like I said, he's going to find his own private island and hide away there and whatever.
For all we know, the ending of The Last Jedi could be that the Porgs wind up being Force sensitive, and they grab some lightsabers and fight Kylo Ren.
Which is probably going to happen. I can see that definitely happening.
Yeah, it'll be like mini Yodas just jumping around all over the place and just pew, 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 pew.
All right. Do you think that at this stage in the game, we have had 2 films, both of them have been very well received, critical and financially. We've had a film coming out which looks great, but we've only had one trailer of The Last Jedi. Everyone forget we've had one trailer, and that was 6 months ago now. We've had this trailer. It's been 6 months. We had Force Friday. Everybody loved the Force Friday hoopla that it was, but that kind of took away from. We haven't had another trailer. We've had one trailer for that one. Han Solo lost his director. They hired the safe bet with Ron Howard. Episode 9 now has lost the director. They hired the safe bet with JJ Abrams. We don't know this Obi-Wan Kenobi movie with the director of Billy Elliot. Who knows where that thing's going right now? Like, I mean, can we trust it? Are they in that aspect? It's almost like the DC Warner Brothers DC universe where they're like, we're going to do this and this and this and this. And this. They're like, slow down, make your movie. I mean, look, when George Lucas was doing it, we went 3 years in between movies, and not even because it took him 3 years to do it. It was just he wanted the 3 years, so he made it take 3 years.
Yeah.
Now they're like, every year a Star Wars film. Is it too much too soon?
Maybe. I mean, maybe Kathleen Kennedy's overworking herself in terms of doing everything. Maybe a whole bunch of these people are just overworking themselves because, again, they're trying to expand Star Wars, but they're also closing it in a little bit by being safe with some of these choices and whatnot. They tried to be daring with people like Lord Miller and Josh Trank and all those types of choices, but so many of them are just not worked out for one reason or another. And what's the comforting thing is what you just started that whole sentence with was the fact that for the most part, both Rogue One and Force Awakens were very financially successful and were very well received altogether. Of course, you can go into the depths of the internet, but I think that you can go into the depths of the internet and find like a Godfather hate group somewhere. So what you got to look at for the most part is that they're having all these troubles, but they're still producing very, very good movies for the most part. Last year, literally a year ago, was all about, is Rogue One going to be a mess? Is it going to be Suicide Squad? If we come to the point where for episode 9, we find out that the trailer editors are going to be editing episode 9, then I'll panic. Then I'll be like, what the heck's going to happen with this movie? But as of right now, what they have been doing, regardless as to all the changes and all the problems they've been having, they still at the end produced a strong product.
Oh, definitely. They have not. Like you just said about Rogue One, Rogue One, 40% reshoots, 60% reshoots. And what happened? It ended up being a fine film. It was from beginning to end. We were all on board with it. There was a few problems here and there, but there's a few problems with The Force Awakens. There's a few problems with, what won Best Picture last year. That thing, well, there was a few problems announcing the Best Picture last year. Like, there's problems in every film. No film is completely perfect. You just have to go in and accept it for what it is. And those people that are like, Kathleen Kennedy's ruining Star Wars. How is she ruining Star Wars? So far, she's made 2 decent films. Whether or not you think they're better than the original trilogy, whether or not you think they're better than the prequel trilogy or the original 6, doesn't really matter, because right now this is the trajectory that they are on. I mean, when The Phantom Menace came out, I've said it before, I'll say it again. That was my favorite Star Wars film for that moment, was that film. You're always on a high the minute you see a film, and then years later you come to the realization that is actually the second best Star Wars film. So then you figure it all out, though. I mean, we did way back in January, and we'll probably do it again this January. We did our ranking of the top Star Wars films, and Rogue One and Force Awakens were pretty low on the list. I think they were halfway through the list. Force Awakens was low.
Yeah, I remember Force Awakens was pretty darn low. I think it was like third last, or maybe fourth last.
Yeah, I think it was like
2.
6 out of the 8, I think.
Yeah.
I believe. So since we mentioned that, if you haven't watched that, what we did was there was 5 of us, and we all did a ranking Force Away from our first favorite Star Wars movie to the bottom. Not that any of us have a favorite necessarily. It's just we did this for fun. So our number 1 would get a certain amount of points, and then our last one would get a certain amount of points, and I just added them all up. And what happened was Force Awakens was around 6, and I think Rogue One was 4th, and then the original trilogy was 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, it definitely was the original trilogy. The
original trilogy there, and Rogue One surprised me with being 4th or 5th or wherever it was, and that was good. But when I did that list, I actually had to think about it, and it's weird because The Force Awakens, especially Rogue One, they were so fresh in your memory. And you're like, where does this stand? Where does this stand? And for me right now, I don't know if the Disney ones, I don't know where they stand necessarily. I think The Last Jedi is the telling factor of it all. I do think, though, at the end of it all, The Force Awakens will be looked back upon much like The Phantom Menace is, in that you don't necessarily need it, if that makes any sense. I mean, I know that there are things you're going to need, but at the same time, if 8 does its job, you'll almost feel like, well, I didn't really need to know like much of 7. Although the other counter is the Han Solo death and things like that are very, you need that going forward, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like, where the Phantom Menace, there are things in Phantom Menace that you need to know happen as well. But you could go without that one. And that's the fear I have for The Force Awakens, is if 8 and 9 really take these films, the series franchise, to the next level, what will that do for The Force Awakens? Will it make it weaker, or will it make it stronger?
I mean, it's difficult to tell, because I think on average, a lot of people, I think almost everybody would say that Force Awakens is a stronger movie than Phantom Menace, I think, on average. But the thing is that's so similar between the two, is that both movies brought a new generation of people, right? Like, there's so many people that are in their 20s right now that just have such fond memories of going to Phantom Menace. We're even older, and we have fond memories of going to go see Phantom Menace in the theater at that time. So it was, and it's going to be the same thing with Force Awakens. Like, again, I've told you a few of my friends that they've gone to go see Force Awakens who have not, and they had not cared for Star Wars movies, and Force Awakens is their favorite Star Wars movie. And that was probably the case with some people, and a lot of people with Phantom Menace, where they just saw that movie and they were like, "Oh my God, this is so fun!" All that type of stuff. So it's going to be hard to tell, I think, with it, because again, we still don't know what Last Jedi is going to be like. If it turns out that Last Jedi is very nostalgic as well, and it hasn't really, it's a great movie, but it hasn't really separated itself from other Star Wars movies, then it's really hard to tell. As of right now, like, when we started this whole discussion about the ranking Star Wars bit, I think what my list was back then is probably still the same right now, but it'll be interesting what it'll be like come January or December, whenever we decide to do this list again. So I mean, it's really hard to, I think, compare right now because we started this whole thing about, Lord and Miller, they dropped out, and Ron Howard's coming in as a safe choice to direct the movie. So now, again, how much of Lord and Miller's movie is going to be in that movie in May? That's still...
I'm betting very, very little.
Very little, but I'm almost wondering if we're going to see some hilarious bit or something like that, and we'll find out later. It's like, hey, Lord and Miller did direct that, and it could always be like a very interesting thing that we're talking about, how they're sending these directors to replace other directors that were not a safe choice for whatever reason, and they're taking a safe choice to replace them. But I'm almost wondering if these daring directors that started off these projects on, if anything is gonna transfer over to the final material that will say, that make you be like, hey, that is kind of, there's a lot of very original moments in this movie. Like something that will transfer over.
I think they haven't really, none of their choices have been that daring. Lord and Miller was the only one of the choices that they made that have been strange. When you think of Trevorrow, wasn't a daring choice. He's so safe because he was the guy who just came off of Jurassic World, and I think they thought he'll do whatever they want him to do. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't have a track record. Lord and Miller, they tried to, from all the reports, they've tried to make Han Solo into a comedy instead of like the movie that it should be.
The Ace Ventura story.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever, right?
And the problem with that is, look, and I said this on the podcast the other day, is if they were to make their own original Star Wars film about Bob the Jedi and they made it a comedy like that, and like an action comedy, we could accept that. But you're taking the character of Han Solo, who has been in our lives for 40 years, who is Harrison Ford. So now you got another actor playing the character who we've associated with Harrison Ford. That's already dangerous enough. That's tricky for them. So you've got that. Then you're going to make him into a goofy, slapstick kind of character just so you can have a couple laughs, a couple jokes, because that's what you feel your bread and butter is. Then you have a script written by Hollywood royalty and Lawrence Kasdan, and you're like, we'll just go and we're going to say whatever we want the characters to say going forward. So then you put that in. That is just a cluster muck when you have this is a franchise. This isn't an independent film. This isn't, we're going to make 21 Jump Street and let Jonah Hill do whatever he wants. This is Lucasfilm and Disney and Star Wars. It's a property that is loved. It's a property that is respected. It's a property that has a certain pedigree to follow, and they definitely went in the wrong course. So I just think they're the only choice that was really daring, and it fell flat on the face. And so they got someone who respects the property, respects old Hollywood, respects the process. And they got Ron Howard, who is very safe, but he's safe because of the respect. And from everything we heard before any of this happened was that the Han Solo script was one of the best scripts in Hollywood. So the film that we're going to get, I don't know if it'll have much of what Lord and Miller did at all, because, I mean, they had to recast Michael K. Williams entirely with Paul Bettany. And they didn't recast him with, just some schmuck off the side of the street because they needed him for a couple of scenes. They did the whole role. I think, this film, I believe, just wrapped from the reshoots, which started in July. That's almost as much time as Lord and Miller were shooting it. And they, we've heard 75% were shot of this film. So I think, there's a good chance very, very little of what they did is going to end up in the final cut of Han Solo. Because don't forget, reshoots are to follow.
There's still more reshoots, right? That's a question I was about to ask, was that, are there going to be more even reshoots with Han Solo? But anyway, you were mentioning about the daring directors. This guy has obviously been off directing from directing a movie for a while. But another one I was referring to was Josh Trank as well. Yeah. He would have been a more daring choice too, because he's a very serious director. He's got some type of Fincherisms within his movies as well.
But then you hear what happened to him, and I think it was the Simon Kinberg thing when the Fantastic Four, where he just hated working with them, and he was just like Trevorrow, I guess, like young Trevorrow. And I think that was the problem. And they cut that early on. That was right before he didn't touch. I don't even think he had a script. It was just like, you're not working. We don't want to work with you. We can wait for this film anyway. There's no rush. You're out of here. I think he would have made a great Star Wars film, to be honest. The first half of Fantastic Four is great. The second half.
The second half is awful. I almost kind of liked the first 30 minutes or something like that. I thought it was okay.
I was really enjoying it until
yeah. But to get it back to the guys that are currently working on episode 9, the funny thing is that we're talking about this divisive options and ones that kind of clash with people. There were the reports about JJ Abrams did clash with Kathleen Kennedy, right, for Force Awakens and with some of the stars. There was that, but at the end of the day, he did build a movie that was to their satisfaction.
Well, it made $2 billion.
It made $2 billion, exactly. So I'm almost wondering if that will still be there at all. Like if Kathleen Kennedy will be looking over her shoulder. She will obviously be looking over her shoulder. But I'm saying is, will they clash again for episode 9? Will there be something stuff that we're going to hear about? Because the funny thing, we're going back to Rian Johnson again, and so far I feel like that's the only script that you have not heard anything about. Like the stuff I've been hearing about is praise, where JJ Abrams says like, oh, he wishes he was able to do episode 8 with that script. Like everyone's loved that script. You haven't heard about any clashing with Kathleen Kennedy or anybody with Rian Johnson, and it's just funny because Rian Johnson's just like, I want to watch this movie. I want to be a fan. And, he's going to take his time with his family because, again, he's probably devoted the last 2 years of his life to this movie for The Last Jedi. So
any of this, Chris Terrio, all the directors poop canned, has any of this? Are you going to go into Han Solo and be nervous, or are you just going to go in and be able to enjoy it?
I feel like I'm going to be nervous no matter what, but the level of how nervous I am will have to do with the trailers, I think. I'll see the trailers, and then suddenly I'll either be more nervous or I'll be like, okay, this movie looks pretty good.
So, I think this is the first Lucasfilm movie. I think Rogue One was half a Lucasfilm. I think this is the first pure new regime Lucasfilm Star Wars film. That's what I think.
Han Solo is?
Yeah, I think it is because Rian Johnson did his thing. JJ Abrams kind of did his thing. Rogue One, Gareth Edwards did. Then they went back, they reshot 40, 60%, whatever it was. This one, they were just like, get them all out. This is the movie we're making. Right? And they were tunnel vision. This is the film. And they went down, and this is the first. This is, I think, everyone said Rogue One is they're taking a chance. Not really. This Han Solo was never a chance, and now I think they've turned this into a big chance for them, because if it does not pay off, then the questions are, well, what was the Lord and Miller one like? Maybe that was what we should have got, and they know that that's where they are. It gets dangerous now for them. They're walking on a tight rope, and they have to figure it out. And I think Kathleen Kennedy's smart, the story group's smart, Ron Howard's smart. I mean, yeah, he's made some blunders in the past, but I think he knows a good film, a good script from a bad one. He knows a good production house from a bad one. And Lucasfilm's not run by fools, and I think this one, they're going to do everything they can to make this a home run.
Yeah, and it's funny because before this movie even started, we knew about the directors. People were happy about Lord and Miller at that time. And the thing that was always the question mark was, is Alden Ehrenreich going to be able to be as good as Harrison Ford, or even comparable to Harrison Ford as Han Solo? And I wonder if now, or at least over the past few months, if Alden Ehrenreich's pressure has gone down, elevated a little bit, or if it's only gone up higher. Because the thing is that everybody's talking about Han Solo is not Alden Ehrenreich anymore. It's about the actual production itself, right? I'm sure like Alden Ehrenreich is in the back of everybody's head still. It's like, is he going to be a good Han Solo? But now it's about, are they going to be able to make a good movie in general? Because, I just wonder like what's going on in Alden Ehrenreich's head at least over the course of the last 6 months, because he was doing his thing, and he probably had to change his performance completely, because if this Ace Ventura story was real, then he probably had to change his performance completely.
Do you think if that is real, if that is factual, do you think that might have been a part of Lord and Miller, and maybe even Alden Ehrenreich, if he's the one that complained about it, then maybe not, but where they were like, look, this kid is not Harrison Ford. People are going to everyone is going to compare him to Harrison Ford. Let's change it up. Let's make him not Harrison Ford. Let's go in such a different direction that you cannot compare him to Harrison Ford. He could be his own Han Solo, his own character. And do you think that might be the reason for all of that?
Maybe, but I think really the question is when does Han Solo movie take place? Because if this Han Solo movie is supposed to take place 2 or 3 years before, let's say, A New Hope, then I see no absolute reason why they could change the character that much, and how this Han Solo character could become this confident and, he's exactly comfortable in his own skin type of character over that amount of time. So like they would almost have to like rewind a fair bit, like to make him like a teenager or something like that to be that way, because I just don't see how they could transition that Han Solo, that this Ace Ventura, comedy Han Solo into the Han Solo that we see in A New Hope that quickly. So, and just judging by Alden Ehrenreich's age and how he looks as an actor, I don't think they could possibly make him a teenager. He would have to be a Han Solo in his early 20s at the absolute.
Which I think that's what it is, and I think it's going to take place 10 years before A New Hope. 10 years? 10 years, which would make sense because Harrison Ford, I think, was 33 or around that age when he started A New Hope, and then you have Ehrenreich in his early 20s, and then you get that 10-year gap, and then you can tell 3 movies if you still want to, but I doubt that's happening. It'd be a lot of fun. All right, let's wrap this up. We've been rambling long enough. Rob,
lots of side Akbars on this one.
Lots of side Akbars, but I think the bottom line is I don't think either one of us believe Disney has ruined Star Wars. I don't think they're going to ruin Star Wars. I think Lucasfilm knows what they're doing. I think they have a good game plan for everything. And, John Landis came out and he said that, they weren't letting people be creative over there. And I don't think that is, I want to choose what I say here carefully, I guess. But I don't think that's necessarily fair to say, because I think it would be fair to say if Rob, if you had a movie idea and you presented it to, any studio and you said, I want to do this, and they're like, and you're like, I want to do this and it's different, I want to take a chance, and they said no, that's one argument. But when you go into a film franchise that is, when they first got it was 6 films deep, now it's 8 films deep, and you want to start doing things that don't coincide with those 8 previous films, it's a completely different entity on its own. I've compared it to television. It's very formulaic. It is a TV series. Everything, Kathleen Kennedy is the overseer of it all. Kevin Feige and Marvel's the overseer of it all. And yeah, maybe he lets, some of his directors do certain things. But they've also had, 10 years of films where people are just, we're in. Star Wars has had 2 since this. 2. That's not enough to get you in there. The real chance, what Disney needs to do, and I said this on episode 59, is they need to make a spin-off film about somebody somewhere we do not know. That is their Guardians of the Galaxy. That is their Ant-Man to an extent. That is what they need. Once they do that, if that film hits, then they have carte blanche to do whatever, and then Lord and Miller can make their comedy of errors, and, you can get Josh Trank back in there. Trevorrow could be the biggest jerk he wants. He'll still get fired for being a jerk and Solo Trek. But, then you can get these directors to come in, and then their vision can slowly bleed through. But when you do these episodic films, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, look, 10, 11, 12 have to be in line with the previous 9. And 9 has to be in line with the previous 8, and 8, so on and so on. And that is the difference between doing a Star Wars film and doing your indie art house film in Hollywood. That's my final thought on it all. Rob, where can everybody find you at?
Yeah, you can find me at Robert E. McDonald on Twitter and Instagram, and also Stardust again. Download the app, follow me there at Rob Mac, and react. It's up to 30-second reactions. It's cool, it's fun, it's quick.
All right, 30-second reactions, but when I asked you for a minute reaction, you gave me 3.5 minutes. All right, guys, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Petzafina, PEZZZFINA. That's bilingual. That's Petzafina. And you can follow me on Facebook if you want, but I don't do that. And PS4, Petzafina as well. Just look, if you type in Petzafina, I think I'm the only thing that comes up. So just do that. That's me.
Not Pizzafina, though.
No, not pizza. I do love pizza, though. Follow me. We'll talk. It's been a great time. Rob, thanks a lot for joining me on the podcast. And as always, may the force of others be with you.
Always.
Hey, scumbags. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up on our video. As always, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Rebel Scum Podcast, for all the latest videos.